Scotia is the site of a bittersweet reunion this weekend. Normally McLeod now with that interview.
More than 100 people who survived Nova Scotia's Ideal Maternity Home are holding a big reunion this weekend. The home became infamous through the Butterbox baby scandal. During the 30s and 40s, hundreds of babies were born at the home. Most were sold for thousands of dollars to couples who wanted to adopt. But it's claimed that unhealthy and non-white babies were starved to death and then buried in wooden butter boxes. This weekend, survivors of the home plan to unveil a monument dedicated to the babies who died there. And joining us now, Karen Balcom, who is visiting from New Jersey. She's researching the Butterbox babies as part of her PhD program. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And also with us, Bob Hartland, a survivor of the home. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Bob, this isn't the first time you've had a reunion. I just wonder what it's like when survivors get together, knowing that there are hundreds of others who could be with you, who should be with you, but were left to die instead.
Well, as you say, this is the second reunion that we've had. The first one, we didn't have any expectations. This one, we know that there are a lot of people coming from all over North America. The people I've been in touch with, they're excited. It's almost like a homecoming, that you're coming home to meet your family, actually.
Yet most of you had obviously never met before. You were just little babies when you left this home.
Exactly. We left here, or some of us stayed here. Those who left were some as young as 3 days old. There's just a bond has been created with the survivors, and I had phone calls from a few last night who have arrived from the States, and they're just so excited. It's just hard to describe how everyone is feeling at this point.
Now, over the years, through a lot of hard work, you were able to make contact with your mother and eventually meet your father face to face. But there are others coming who haven't had that same luck, I guess, or good fortune. Will there be any reunions this weekend?
There will be several people who will be meeting members of their birth family for the first time. In fact, a couple have already arrived in the province, and that reunion has taken place. We'll have the pleasure of meeting some of these people, hopefully, as the weekend goes on.
And you said a lot of these people are from all over North America. The babies were really scattered, weren't they?
Well, a lot of the babies that went out of the country mainly went to the New Jersey, New York area, but now as adults, of course, they're scattered. We have people arriving, well, between now and Sunday. They'll be coming from Florida, Colorado, Arizona, Texas, New York, New Jersey, Maine, Massachusetts, as well as parts from Ontario, New Brunswick, and all over Nova Scotia.
Now, Karen, a lot of the babies, as Bob mentioned, from this Ideal Maternity Home went to the States. Mm-hmm. How did the owners of this home develop this market in the U.S. for newborns?
There were a couple of factors involved. The first thing was that they advertised quite heavily in New York and New Jersey, and especially in New Jersey. The second factor, many people who are a little familiar with this story may be aware that many of the children from the Ideal Maternity Home were placed in Jewish families in the New York, New Jersey area. It's not impossible, but it's rather unlikely that most of those children were from Jewish backgrounds. This was a huge no-no in adoption practice then, and is a fairly big problem to try to do that kind of thing today.
Why is that? Why was it such a, why the Jewish connection at the time?
Well, there was an assumption at the time that a child was born with a particular religious heritage and a particular religious identity, even where adoption laws were sparse, rudimentary, poorly developed. One thing that was almost always there was a regulation that a child would be placed in a family of the same faith as the birth mother. One effect of this was that families of the Jewish faith had a difficult time finding children that they were able to adopt. In fact, it was almost impossible for Jewish families to adopt children through what might be called approved or government-regulated channels.
Now, the owners of this home made an absolute fortune selling the babies. Just what was a healthy baby worth?
That's a question that we'll never be able to answer completely. We'll also never be able to know exactly what money went to who. There's some evidence that the money was a little bit more widespread than just going to the youngs. It seems to have had a lot to do with how much resources the family had.
And I've heard a figure as high as $10,000, and this is in the 1930s, a huge sum of money.
I've heard figures that high as well.
Karen, what do you hope to get out of this reunion this weekend?
Well, it's a sort of a two-way process for me. On the one hand, I guess I have some information, background, and context about the home and about its connection with other similar practices in other parts of Canada and the United States in the same period. And my experience so far has been that other friends and survivors really want to know that information. It's part of their heritage. At the same time, the survivors have been incredibly generous with me, sharing their stories and talking to me about their backgrounds, about their families. I hope to talk to more of them this weekend about how their adoptions were handled in their families, what their family ideas were about the adoption, how open it was, how the communities that they lived in dealt with this topic in the 1940s and 1950s.
Now, Bob, one of the big events this weekend will be the unveiling of a monument to the babies who didn't survive the Ideal Maternity Home. Tell us about this monument.
Well, the monument was an idea that was conceived back in 1992 when we met for the first time, and through the generous donations of the survivors and through the efforts of the group who have put together the new play that's being shown or performed this week in Chester.
Based on the story of the Butterbox babies?
Based on the story of the survivors.
Okay.
It's all new material. It opened last night in Chester, and a very successful show. I've already heard a few good comments from it. But we will have the monument. The monument was put in place yesterday. It's covered and will be unveiled on Sunday.
Well, thank you very much. It was good to talk to the both of you this morning, and I hope there are some happy reunions this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I know.